My name is Daniel, and before you try to imagine who I was, I need to reveal something I hid so tightly that it became part of my skin and my very breath. For years, I believed that silence was a kind of indestructible armor, a protection built to prevent anyone from touching my deepest wounds, and that the less I spoke about them, the safer I would be, until life showed me that silence heals absolutely nothing, because it only pushes the pain into a dark basement within the soul, where it feeds on our desperate attempt to forget and becomes even more relentless. For a long time, I walked in the shadows believing that this was my natural habitat, as if the darkness gave me power, authority, and invisibility, as if there I could create my own rules, far from any moral judgment that could expose me. I wasn't just a criminal. I became someone who believed the world belonged to the ruthless, to those who feel nothing, to those who can destroy without hesitation. I transformed the fear of others into fuel and converted coldness into identity, as if extinguishing my emotions were proof of strength, as if killing empathy were the only path to victory. I grew up hearing that trusting is dangerous, that showing weakness opens doors to destruction, and that feeling is a risk that exposes what we try hardest to hide. So, instead of admitting that there was still humanity within me, I decided to bury it under layers of arrogance and violence. The more I was feared, the more I believed I was in control, until I realized that controlling through pain isn't power, it's slavery. The terror I provoked fed me on the outside, but corroded me on the inside. Because the absence of feelings isn't freedom, it's a living death. And it was when I thought I had conquered the darkness that I discovered it had conquered me first. At that moment, when all seemed lost, the supernatural broke the silence. Jesus appeared, and nothing remained the same. I know this testimony has already started to move you. Stay until the end. What will still be revealed may change what you believe about life, death, and eternity. If you want to see more testimonies like this, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. This helps this message reach those who need to hear it. When I entered the world of crime, it didn't happen abruptly, because darkness never presents itself as a monster or a threat. It emerges disguised as opportunity, offering a seductive feeling of freedom and immediate belonging, as if it were an alternative path for those who never had access to anything. For someone who grew up believing that feeling was dangerous and that trusting others was equivalent to begging to be betrayed, a life of crime seemed like the perfect scenario. Because in that environment, nobody talked about love, nobody demanded explanations, and any conflict was resolved with silence, violence, and money. There, the colder the heart, the greater its value. And since I was willing to rise at any cost, I began to slowly kill the pieces of humanity that insisted on reminding me who I was before. I will never forget the first time I held easy money, because that feeling acted like a spark, igniting a fire inside me. In that same instant, everything I never had, voice, attention, respect, materialized in folded bills in my hand. And from then on, I became dependent on something that never satisfied me. The power that money gave me was intoxicating because people looked at me with fear, and I confused that fear with respect, believing that being feared made me someone important. The weapons quickly ceased to be mere objects and became an extension of my body. I slept with them nearby, ate with them nearby, and walked the streets as if their presence guaranteed my survival. The illusion that I was in control made me believe I could stop whenever I wanted. However, crime was never a way out, but rather a labyrinth without exit, in which each step forward trapped me a little more. What I called freedom was dependence. What I considered power was merely disguised fear. And it was when I felt untouchable that the fall began. I remember the first time I pulled the trigger like a photograph that never fades from my memory. It wasn't a grand scene, there was no background music or impactful phrases. It was simply a narrow street, a request to show who you are, coming from someone above me in the hierarchy, and an immature heart trying to prove something it didn't even know it was. Seeking. The gun weighed heavily in my hand as if asking me if I was willing to carry what would come next. I said yes. I repeated to myself that this was just another step towards the top. But the truth is that I was there trying to fill the void that had been gnawing at me since long before I entered the world of crime. When I aimed, my hands trembled, not from fear of the other man, but from fear of recognizing myself in it. I could hear my own breath fighting against the accelerated rhythm of my heart, as if my body were trying to warn me that I was about to cross a line from which there is no return. The instant I pulled the trigger, the world fell silent, and that fraction of a second stretched out as if time had stopped just to observe what I was doing. The bang echoed inside me, and when the man fell, I expected to feel guilt, regret, something that would reveal that there was still humanity within me. But there was nothing, just an immense, deep, almost comfortable emptiness. At that moment, I realized that the danger wasn't in the spilled blood. It was in feeling nothing. When coldness took the place that should have been occupied by conscience, I understood that the crime never asked for my body. It always wanted my soul, and I surrendered. The feeling of power mixed with a strange relief, as if that act had proven something to me. I no longer needed to justify anything, because there was nothing left inside me that needed explaining. When you kill what you feel, killing what you live becomes merely a consequence. I thought true power was about not trembling, not questioning, not caring. What I didn't know is that that shot didn't just kill a man. It murdered the part of me that could still have been saved. Every choice has a door, and that door opened to such profound darkness that, even when I wanted to go back, I could no longer find the way out. In that first death, I lost my soul. In the second, I almost lost eternity. After that first shot, something inside me went silent. The voice that had previously whispered questions, that had tried to stop me from crossing the line, disappeared so quietly that I didn't even realize the exact moment it ceased to exist. From then on, violence ceased to be the exception and became routine, and I began to walk through territory where death no longer provoked astonishment, because I had learned to look at people as if they were pieces in a game where I was the only player who mattered. Crime has this terrifying ability. It anesthetizes. First it excites you, then it accustoms you, and finally, it transforms you. With each new action, I needed to feel less in order to obey more, until coldness began to become my way of surviving emotionally. At first, I remembered the faces. I could describe them in detail, from the shape of their eyes to the expression of despair at the last second. Then, the faces became shadows. Then still, they became numbers. When you start seeing human beings as numbers, your soul has already been sold without you even realizing the moment of the transaction. I told myself it was just work, that it was a necessary arrangement, that I was just carrying out orders from people more powerful than me. The more I repeated these justifications, the easier it became to silence any trace of compassion that tried to appear. Indifference doesn't arise by chance. It grows within us each time we choose not to feel. I began to realize that my mind no longer distinguished right from wrong. It only distinguished the useful from the useless. If something hindered business, it was eliminated. If someone interfered with the plan, they were discarded. And I was proud of that, as if this ability to shut off feelings was a kind of evolution. Instead of seeing fragility in those who showed love, I saw a threat, because love slows people down, and I needed speed, precision, and control. But without realizing it, I became a desert. Nothing flourished within. Nothing had value. Nothing was capable of touching me. I stopped feeling pain, but I also stopped feeling joy. Coldness doesn't deliver power, it delivers absence. There was a moment when I realized something was wrong. I was looking in a mirror in the bathroom of a warehouse, where we had hidden after a violent negotiation. And for a few seconds I didn't recognize the man reflected there. The eyes were mine, but there was no light in them, only a deep emptiness, as if I had been replaced by someone who never had a soul. I was a body that walked, talked, threatened, and destroyed. But inside I was hollow. When consciousness dies, the body continues to live, but lives as if it were a ghost. It was only when the emptiness became unbearable that I understood something. Indifference is not protection, it is a slow death. But the real death didn't happen in that mirror. It happened on the day I heard the sound that changed everything, the sound of my own chest being pierced. The night I died began like any other. Adrenaline seemed to course through my veins like fresh blood, and I could no longer imagine life without that constant feeling of danger. I was convinced the world owed me respect, as if every choice I'd made was justified by the simple fact that I'd survived until then. I believed I was invincible, that nothing could touch me, and that I would always be one step ahead of my enemies. Until that night, until that sound, until that second when everything changed. We were in an abandoned warehouse, sealing a deal that should never have happened. The dim lights flickered, and the smell of rust mixed with dust created a suffocating atmosphere. I watched every movement, attentive to every breath, as if I owned the place. When one of the men hesitated, I felt the urge to assert my authority. I took a step forward, and in that instant I sensed something in the air, an invisible tension, as if the world were holding its breath along with me. That's when the shot was fired. I didn't see who fired. I didn't hear the trigger being pulled. The only sound that filled the room was the impact piercing my chest. It didn't feel like a gunshot. It felt like a brutal blow that ripped open a space inside me. I felt the air escape as if it had been stolen, and the pain came not as something physical, but as a shock, a shattering, a revelation that I controlled nothing. My hand instinctively went to my chest, and looking at my blood-stained fingers, reality finally caught up with me. I was dying. My knees buckled, and the cold ground received my body as if it already knew I belonged there. The voices around me echoed distantly, as if underwater. I tried to stay conscious, tried to scream, tried to fight against what had already been decided. But I could no longer control even my own body. I always thought that, in my end, I would have time to think, to reflect, to make some kind of agreement. But death gives no warning. It simply arrives. As my body lost its strength, something peculiar happened. The pain disappeared. In its place, an absolute silence took over everything. A silence so profound it seemed to rip the world away from me. It was in this silence that I understood I had lost control over my destiny. I was no longer the one who decided. I used to think death was the end of the body. But at that exact moment, I discovered that death begins when the body remains, and the soul continues. When silence filled the room, I thought it was just the effect of blood loss or the collapse of my senses. But I realized it wasn't the world that was drifting away. It was me who was drifting away from it. At first, I felt as if I were sinking into an icy sea, unable to control my own body or my own breathing. And for a few moments, I had the impression that I was trapped between two places, as if time had stopped. In this limbo, I realized something impossible to ignore. I was no longer inside myself. It was as if an invisible part, previously silent and ignored, had begun to detach itself without my permission. The sensation wasn't of falling, it was of separation. When I finally found myself separating from my body, not as a metaphor, but as a terrifying and concrete reality, terror gripped me with such force that no confrontation, no weapon, no enemy could ever provoke it. I floated above the scene and saw everything from the outside, trapped in a weightless consciousness, yet still carrying fear. I saw my body on the ground, motionless, pale, surrounded by people in despair, and it was then that the truth erupted within me with the brutality of a sentence. I no longer had control over anything. The blood that stained the ground no longer belonged to me. The failing breath no longer obeyed my will, and the screams of the men surrounding me no longer reached the part of me that was conscious. I tried to come back. I tried to push out the air, to force my lungs to work, to move my hands, anything that could reconnect me to the body that had always felt so strong. Nothing responded. It was like screaming underwater, like banging on a door with no handle. I could see, but I couldn't be seen. I could hear, but I couldn't be heard. This helplessness was more devastating than any physical pain I'd ever felt. It was like witnessing my own death without being able to interfere. The sensation of detachment intensified until the entire room began to lose its shape, as if being swallowed by a thick darkness. I felt something pulling me away, not like a wind or a physical force, but like a spiritual magnet, an attraction I couldn't resist. The more I tried to fight, the further I got from where my body was. I didn't know where I was going. I only realized I had no choice. It was at that moment that I understood a terrible truth. Death is not just the end of life. It is the beginning of something we cannot control. I thought I would be greeted by emptiness. Instead, someone was waiting for me. When that invisible force ripped me from where I was, I imagined I would fall into some kind of absolute darkness, empty and silent. But what happened was very different. The sensation was like being led through a formless space, as if I were inside a corridor without walls, where time obeyed no human measure. Every thought that arose within me echoed, as if it could be heard aloud, as if nothing could be hidden or omitted. Gradually, I realized that I wasn't floating of my own free will, but being carried towards something inevitable, like someone being led to a judgment from which there is no escape or preparation. I no longer felt my body, but I felt something even more intense and frightening: total awareness. The shadows of the choices I made seemed to walk beside me, and each mistake took the form of a living presence. It was then that a light appeared in the distance, a light unlike any earthly illumination, because it didn't hurt the eyes, but pierced the soul with such a profound reach that I felt as if I were being stripped bare inside. That light wasn't just brightness. It was presence, awareness, truth. And without anyone needing to explain it to me, I knew I was standing before something greater than any existing power. The light began to take shape until, finally, I saw it. Jesus did not appear as a distant, idealized image, because the majesty emanating from him was impossible to ignore. His gaze carried neither hatred nor accusation, but possessed a truth so absolute that it pierced all my defenses. In that instant, I saw myself without masks. I tried to justify my crimes in my mind. I tried to blame abandonment, rejection, and the wounds I carried throughout my life. But no justification stood before him. His presence did not point to the blood I had stained, but to the emptiness I tried to hide behind power and coldness. For the first time, I understood that my indifference was not courage, it was escape. And in that look, without a single word, Jesus showed me the destiny of those who reject the light. When Jesus' gaze pierced my soul, something began to unfold around me, not as an external vision, but as an inner revelation, a spiritual exposure that didn't ask permission to happen. The light that had previously surrounded me began to recede, revealing a darkness so intense it couldn't be compared to an earthly night. It wasn't an absence of light, but the presence of something real, dense, conscious. It was as if that darkness were alive and watching me, waiting only for permission to swallow me. I felt neither heat nor cold, but a sensation of absolute abandonment, as if all the voices of the universe had been silenced at once. Jesus didn't push me to that place. He simply let me see where I was going, and that difference is devastating. The torment wasn't in the fire, but in the realization that I myself had chosen that path every day. I saw people there. They weren't screaming from physical pain. They were screaming because there was no turning back, because repentance no longer produced change, because no tear could alter the destiny sealed by the choices they made while they were still breathing. What tore me apart the most was realizing that hell wasn't a punishment from God, it was a consequence of separation. an entire eternity separated from the presence of the one who is life, peace, and meaning. As I watched, faces began to emerge from the darkness. Faces of people who had passed through my life and who had been destroyed by my choices. They didn't accuse me with words. Their gaze was enough. It was as if every tear they had caused fell upon me at that moment. I felt the weight of every interrupted destiny, every shattered family, every dream that never had the chance to exist. The pain I had ignored while breathing now became the only thing I could feel. It was as if the abandonment I had caused others returned to engulf me completely, tearing from me everything I liked to believe I possessed. I wanted to ask for help. I wanted to scream for Jesus not to leave me there. But my voice seemed trapped in a suffocating silence. I realized that despair isn't a loud scream. It's the awareness that you have no choice anymore. Darkness seemed to approach, as if trying to claim me. And at that moment, Jesus placed his hand on my shoulder. His touch wasn't like a human touch. It was like feeling life entering a place that had been dead for a long time. The light enveloped me again, as if rescuing my consciousness from the abyss. And Jesus said without speaking, "This isn't your place, yet." The word "yet" struck me as both a judgment and an opportunity. I understood that the revelation was not condemnation. It was mercy. It showed me the destiny I was choosing day after day so that I would have the chance to change while there was still time. It wasn't God sending me there. I was going of my own free will, guided by my decisions and the absence of true repentance. If you were standing before eternity today, would your soul be walking toward the light or the darkness? Write in the comments, "Lord, there is still time for me." When Jesus' hand touched my shoulder, I felt something I had never experienced in all my life of violence and masks. It wasn't just warmth. It was as if all the coldness I had carried for years had melted away in a single instant. The sensation was so profound that I realized, for the first time, I was truly feeling. It wasn't fear. It wasn't guilt. It was awareness. A painful and at the same time liberating awareness, because in that presence I understood that repentance is not shame for what I did. Repentance is sorrow for who I have become. In the blink of an eye, I was pulled back into the physical world, as if an enormous weight had been placed on my chest. A sharp sound cut through the silence, and I realized I was listening to the heart monitor beside the bed. The bright hospital light blinded me for a few seconds, and I breathed heavily, trying to understand if I was really back or experiencing some kind of hallucination. The doctor beside me widened his eyes as if he had seen a ghost, and a nurse dropped a clipboard on the floor when she realized I was awake. They repeated words I couldn't understand because all that mattered at that moment was the certainty that I had received something I didn't deserve, a second chance. When I finally managed to be alone, I cried in a way I had never cried before. It wasn't a cry of physical pain. It was a cry of recognition. I cried for the man I had been, for the lives I had destroyed, for the darkness I had accepted as a companion for so many years. The coldness I had always considered a sign of strength had proven to be a prison. And in that hospital room, I felt the door finally opening. I knew I couldn't bring back the lives of the people I had hurt, but I could give meaning back to what remained of my own existence. At that moment, I did something I never imagined I could do. I spoke to God. Not to Jesus the judge, but to Jesus the merciful. And with a broken voice I said, "If there is still a purpose for me, show me the way, because I no longer know how to live without you." From that day on, I decided that I would no longer live as a murderer, but as someone who had been pulled from the darkness when there was no hope left. If you believe that God can still transform a broken story, write in the comments, "I get my second chance." After I left the hospital, many people thought I was just traumatized, that the near-death experience had created a fertile imagination, and that with the passing of months, I would forget everything. But what I experienced was not a projection of my brain trying to protect itself, nor a way to escape pain. It was a profound spiritual revelation, because since that day, I have never been able to look at life with the same eyes again. Each sunrise has become a reminder that I am not here because I deserved it, but because I received mercy. I woke up on the other side certain of only one thing. No one remains the same after seeing Jesus. You can try to run, you can pretend you didn't understand, you can invent justifications, but you can no longer hide from yourself. I spent years believing that eternity was a religious myth invented to control people, but in His presence I saw that eternity is not a threat. It's a consequence. We walk daily towards some spiritual destination, and our choices are the steps that lead us there. While I lived a life of crime, I said I didn't need God because I thought controlling my destiny was synonymous with freedom. But when I found myself before divine judgment, I discovered that the greatest captivity wasn't the world. It was my own unrepentant heart. I understood that hell doesn't begin after death. Hell begins when man decides to live far from God while he is still breathing. Faith didn't transform me overnight. I still face consequences. I still struggle with memories. I still carry scars. But today I know that the presence of Jesus is the only place where guilt loses its power and where the past doesn't determine the future. He didn't give me back my life so I could hide what I've lived through. He gave me back so I could bear witness. I return to warn that there is no neutrality. Either you walk towards the light or you move away from it. Silence is also a choice, and procrastination is also an answer. Don't wait to lose everything to discover what really matters. Don't wait for eternity to want to start over. If you feel this calling within you, this restlessness, this desire to surrender what you can no longer carry alone, don't ignore it. Jesus doesn't reject anyone who truly asks for help. If this story touched your life, subscribe to the channel to continue receiving messages that awaken, confront, and transform. Write in the comments, "I choose the light," and allow God to write the next chapter of your story.